Hello, my name is Kiersten, and my favorite part of the brain is the hypothalamus. So, I wanted to start my presentation by just kind of going over the basics of where the hypothalamus is and what it does, which are all things that we have covered in this class. So, all this information came from our PowerPoints and from our book. So the hypothalamus, it's found in the diencephalon. It contains small nuclei with a variety of functions, and it does a couple different things. What I'm going to focus on in my presentation is how it regulates hunger, but it also regulates thirst, body temperature, and sexual behavior as well. So hunger and the hypothalamus. How do we know we are hungry, or how does our brain really tell us that we are hungry? So the lateral hypothalamus responds to any external or internal cues. So external cues would be things like sight and smell of food. So when you walk in to grandma's house on Thanksgiving Day and it smells delicious and you instantly are ready to eat up all the food, that would kind of be an example of an external cue. And then also the time of day. So how when we wake up in the morning, we're hungry for breakfast. Around lunchtime, we get hungry again, and then at dinner. So different times of the day can kind of help to tell us when we're hungry. And then internal cues would be things like our stomach growling, the glucose availability, and the quantities of stored fat that are in our body. And then how do we know when we are full? So the ventromedial hypothalamus regulates our state of feeling full. And also one thing I found to be interesting as I was doing research is it also uses muscle memory. So our stomach is used to holding, a certain amount of food. So when it expands to that, let's say threshold, it sends signals to our brain that we're full and it doesn't need any more food in the stomach. And vice versa, it'll do the same thing when it kind of gets too low. So it hasn't expanded all the way out yet, so it tells you that you need some more food so that you can get to that feeling of being full. So I kind of wanted to focus my presentation on eating disorders and how they affect the hypothalamus and the part of the brain that kind of regulates hunger. Eating disorders kind of hit hard to me because my aunt suffered for many years from anorexia, and unfortunately she passed away, and we obviously believe that it was because of her eating disorder and her body not getting the nutrients and not getting the things she needed. Her heart ended up failing and just in the middle of the night. So this is kind of something that I really wanted to research, and I, for many years, have been wanting to know more and more about it. So this slide, I kind of just talk about the definitions of the different eating disorders in case people, aren't familiar. So anorexia is an eating disorder characterized by voluntary self-starvation. This can be through restricting food intake or exercising excessively, or it could even be both. And then bulimia is an eating disorder characterized by cycles of binging and purging. So patients with this disorder would engage in induced vomiting, and they use laxatives as well to kind of help the food move through their body faster. So this research study I found was actually really interesting. They looked at the ability for patients with eating disorders to override hunger signals from the brain, so the hunger signals that come from the hypothalamus. So the study tested brain structure and function using brain activation data while people with and without eating disorders tasted certain sugars. And as humans, sugar is supposed to kind of activate hunger cues in the brain. And as a result, the sugar consumption had a reverse effect for those with eating disorders. They discovered that those with eating disorders had widespread alterations in the structure of brain pathways that involved taste reward and appetite regulation. These alterations were found in the white matter, which functions as a communication coordinator between parts of the brain. And then the doctor that kind of headed this entire research study, Dr. Guido Frank from the University of Colorado, he believes that this type of research could potentially indicate if eating disorders are genetically driven or learned behaviors, which I found to be pretty interesting. So, as I mentioned in the slide before, humans are programmed to like the taste of sweets. However, in the patients with eating disorders, this was not the case. The taste of something sweet had a negative impact on them due to the fact that their brains have now been kind of programmed to correlate the sweet taste with gaining weight, which is something that they don't want to happen. And then one thing that I kind of found interesting about the study was that it claims that one could see such avoidance being how they were wanting to avoid the sweet taste because to them it correlates to them gaining weight, could be seen as a form of learned behavior and more specifically operant conditioning. And then operant conditioning, for those who don't know, is learning that links behavior with its consequences or rewards, but in this case, consequences, producing change in the subsequent frequency of the behavior. So basically, the patients with the eating disorder, the sweet taste was kind of a trigger to them that they should avoid that kind of food because of the punishment that it could cause to them, which would be the gaining weight. And that concludes my presentation. These are my references to the different research studies that I use, so feel free to check them out. They're pretty interesting to really go in depth and look at the research that they did on the ability of people with eating disorders to be able to almost train their brain to not give them the hunger cues that we normally get. So thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope that you enjoyed it.